Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. In the month of September I read 30 books, which is ridiculous considering I was also working a full-time job. I made it my goal to read one book every day, and that worked out pretty well for me. There's a few days where I read 2 books, and then some days where I didn't read any at all. But I think overall I did pretty well. There's only a few books that were like novellas or really short that I kind of like crammed in there to make sure I could keep up with the goal. Otherwise, I'm very proud of myself. I definitely found some new favorite books this month. There's like probably 10 on here that got put onto my all-time favorites list. So I'm really excited about that. Also lots of fall themed books. I started fall books on like September 1st, which is a bit early, but I take advantage of the seasons. Fall's my favorite, so I thought we're gonna start this party early. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the books. I've got my bullet journal here with a list of all the books I read, so I'll be referring to that. I also am not going to give the greatest summaries, A, because I'm bad at summaries, and B, because I personally find them boring to watch. I just don't think that you need another summary of like some of the most popular YA fantasy books out there. So if it's kind of lesser known, I'll try to give you a brief overview, but otherwise, I'm just going to show you the books. Okay, so the first 2 books I read were The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I had actually never read the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black before, and I can't believe I never had. They were really, really good. They're very hyped, so I was worried that going into them I wouldn't really enjoy them as much as I thought I might, but turns out I did. The world building is beautiful, and I really liked the writing. I don't know if I am as into the romance as some people are, because it's a bit weird to me, but anyway, this is about a human girl named Jude who lives in the world of fairy, and there's a boy named Carden, and lots of intrigue and courts and royalty and things like that. See, this is what I mean about not being good at summaries. Like, did you really need to hear that? Anyway, I really enjoyed both of these books. I don't have the copy of Queen of Nothing because I'm waiting for it to come out in paperback so that all my copies match. But this is The Wicked King, and I gave both of these 5 stars. Here's another all-time favorite book. This is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. I love Marie Lu. She wrote the Legend trilogy. This is actually my Marie Lu shelf here. As well as the Warcross books, which I haven't read yet, and the Young Elites, which I really liked. This is a real departure from what she normally writes. It's actually a historical fantasy centered around Mozart's sister, who is also a child prodigy, and it was absolutely amazing. First of all, I have the Owl Crate edition, which is just stunning. It's got silver sprayed edges, and the cover is like a different blue than the regular one. It's also signed, and it's got like a beautiful map here and an author letter. So love this edition. But yeah, I flew through this book. It's absolutely magical. Her writing never fails, and I'm super excited to read her new book, Shadowhunter. But yeah, this one also went on the all-time favorite shelf, 5 stars. Okay, next up, I decided I was in a historical fiction mood, so I reread one of my favorite historical fiction books called Orphan, Monster, Spy by Matt Killeen. This is about a Jewish girl named Sarah who ends up working as a spy for the British government. I think she's 15. It's very creepy and chilling. The blurb on the cover is actually deeply disturbing and chillingly good, and I would agree with that. The main reason I love this book so much specifically is that it takes place in a school setting, and I am a sucker for any books about like boarding schools. I don't know why. I also read the sequel to this book, which I didn't know was a thing until I finished this and looked it up on Goodreads. It's called Devil Darling Spy, and I can't really say what it's about without any spoilers, but it actually takes them into Africa and some countries that you don't really read that much about in World War II historical fiction. So I really enjoyed both of them. They're not 5-star reads, but they are really good. I think I gave them both 4 stars. Okay, next up I wanted to do another comfort reread because I allow myself to do those a lot. So I reread Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra, Clare, and these other authors here. This is a collection of novellas following mostly Simon at the Shadowhunter Academy in Idris. Yeah, I actually really like this, and it made me want to reread every single Shadowhunter book, which is dangerous, because that would be a full month of reading. So the next books that I read were the Vampire Academy series. There are 6 books, and I have 4 of them here. There's Vampire Academy, Blood Promise, Frostbite, Shadow Kiss, Spirit Bound, and Last Sacrifice. And I love these books. I read them about 5 years ago, and I decided that it was time since I'm back in my Twilight phase. Thanks to the release of Midnight Sun, but these take place at a school, which means that I automatically love them. They're both vampires, love it. And the main protagonist is a badass. So this follows Rose and her best friend, who is a vampire named Lissa, and all their adventures in romance. The romance is a little bit questionable if you actually think about it, but I still fully support it somehow. So I love these books, unironically. I think I give them all 4 or 5 stars. I don't think there's one that's bad or anything like that. I do think the story kind of drags on a little bit, and I don't know that it necessarily needed to be 6 books, but I will keep rereading them all, so I guess it's not a bad thing. The next book I read was my most anticipated release in September, and that is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. First off, beautiful autumnal cover. I love the colors and the texture of this cover. It's gorgeous. This is a sequel to Serpent and Dove, which follows a witch and a witch hunter who are forced to get married. It was good, but it wasn't as good as Serpent and Dove, which I do think is really common for second books in trilogies, which this has been turned into. But it just kind of dragged a little bit. I didn't feel super invested. The atmosphere and the characters were still amazing, but I read this about a month ago and I've already forgotten a lot of what happened, which is usually not a great sign. So I think I gave this one 3.5 stars. I am 100% going to read the third book in the series, and I still really enjoyed it. It just didn't quite live up to the hype of the first one for me. Okay, next up is one of those books that I was talking about that I kind of read to fill in a gap and get myself to my goal because it's only about, 100 pages. And that is Cruel Crown by Victoria Aveyard. This is a set of 2 novellas in the Red Queen world following Queen Corianne and Captain Farley. And I actually enjoyed this way more than I enjoyed the Red Queen series, which I feel very conflicted on. I love the world in that series, I just didn't like Mare, who is the protagonist. And this doesn't follow Mare, so it's perfect. I am looking forward to reading the other novellas in this series. I also just followed Victoria Aveyard on TikTok because she made an account, and she's got this beautiful home, beautiful life, super cute dog, so I'm kind of obsessed with her now, and I'm really looking forward to see what she writes next. Next up, I read another all-time favorite, and that is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. When I looked at stuff on Goodreads, I enjoyed it so much that I was expecting to see a bunch of glowing reviews, but it gets quite conflicting opinions, actually. So it's like a 300-page fantasy standalone, which means that you're not going to get that much world building, and you're not going to learn very much about, the magic system or the kingdom or anything like that. But this is very much about the protagonist, Alessandra, who is a feminist queen. And not a literal queen, just a feminist icon. Maybe that's a better word. I don't really know how to explain this plot, except that there is a friends to... No, I can't say that without spoiling it. Basically, she wants to marry the Shadow King, who is a very eerie figure, and then kill him and take over the kingdom for herself, but her plans kind of change as things go along. And she is just awesome. I love her, and this was a really nice departure from usual fantasy female protagonists. Next up, I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This is basically just about finding inner peace and leaving your ego behind. It's very hippy-dippy. So you really have to be in the right mindset to read it. It took me 6 weeks to read this book because I could only do 1 chapter at a time. It's quite repetitive. I don't know how I felt about it. I think that if you're into spirituality, you'll definitely get some things from it, but it might take you a while to get those out of it. You can see I do have some tabs here, but they kind of stopped during the second half and I got a little bit bored. It's called A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment, so that's what it's supposed to be, and it's really hard to review nonfiction. I did learn from it, and it was okay. That's pretty much. Next up was another all-time favorite, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I also read this as an ebook from my library, so I don't have it, but it was amazing. This is a adult contemporary romance following a girl named Chloe who enlists the help of a man named Red to help her complete kind of a bucket list, things that she wants to do to improve her life because she's living with a chronic illness and she doesn't feel like she's living her life to the fullest. The representation in it is amazing for many different things. There's abusive relationships, there's chronic illness, like I mentioned, and different races and body types and everything like that. It was just wonderful, and I can't wait to read the other books in the companion series. I flew through it, and I cried, and I laughed, and you should read it. Another ebook, I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I recently read the Shadow and Bone trilogy by this author, and I'm planning to read Six of Crows, which is obviously super popular. But I decided to read Ninth House for the fall because it follows a girl and a secret society of ghosts, basically, or they deal with ghosts at Yale, which is all the things I love in a fall book. Ghosts, school, magic, etc. The beginning was very slow and I really struggled to get into it, but around the halfway mark, I found myself super drawn in and I loved the rest of it. I think it is going to be a series, so I'm interested to see where it goes next. Writing, it's much more adult and kind of explicit in several ways, but it was really enjoyable, perfect for the fall, so I would definitely recommend picking it up in October, especially. Next up is another super quick contemporary book that I read to get myself up to my goal, and that is Falling Into Place by Amy Zhang. This follows a girl named Liz who tries to kill herself, and the book kind of goes back and forth between different perspectives. There's an omniscient narrative too, trying to figure out why she tried to kill herself, what happened to lead her to that point, etc., etc. So there's some flashbacks to the past, there's some perspectives in the present, and it's really interesting. The writing is just stunning. That's the main thing about this book. Amy Zhang just has an amazing way of communicating all the feelings that these high school students were feeling. It was very impactful, made me cry, and it's a quick read. So I would definitely recommend picking this up if you're looking for not something light and fluffy at all, because it's very depressing, something moving and emotional. It's a book that I'm so excited to talk about, and that is The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. This was absolutely amazing, and possibly my #1 favorite book of the year so far, but I would have to look at a list because I've read a lot of books this year. This follows an amazing cast of characters. I'm not going to name all their names and give you their backgrounds, but all 5, debatably 6 of the main protagonists are absolutely incredible. You'll fall in love with each of them individually. It's not like one of those books where there is the main character and the rest are cool, but you're not as invested in them. It's set in Paris in the 1800s, and they are basically trying to steal back someone's birthright and claim their place in society. The atmosphere is amazing, Roshani Chokshi's writing is amazing, the characters are amazing, and the plot is super cool. I did see a lot of people on Goodreads say that they were confused by this, plot-wise, and it is kind of a lot to take in, but if you just remind yourself, you don't need to understand every single detail, you just need to understand the atmosphere. Well, that's what I told myself. This is a 5-star read, and obviously one of my all-time favorites. I actually read Gilded Wolves at a very convenient time because the next day, The Silvered Serpents, which is the sequel to that book, came out. This was like a real struggle for me to get. It took my chapters, I think, 5 or 6 days to get it in stock, which was very frustrating. I think I called them every day just to see if they had it yet, which was very psychotic of me, but I got my hands on it. This follows obviously the same cast of characters, but it is taking place in Siberia instead and in Russia. So again, wonderful atmosphere, more of a winter book, but obviously I had to read it in the fall, and you will fall even deeper in love with the characters. It's gorgeous, and you need to read this series. Next up, I read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I had seen this all over YouTube, and I didn't really feel that much interest in reading it, but I got this book for really cheap, and I just decided I was kind of in the mood for some portal fantasy. This is also set in a school, so that's the other thing that encouraged me to read it. It follows children who went to different worlds through portals, kind of like in Narnia, and then they came back to our world, and they're struggling to accept that, basically. So there's a school where they can go so that they don't have to fit into normal society. I thought it was going to be kind of middle grade, but it's definitely not. There's like swearing and explicit things, so I would say it's closer to adult. It's also a very quick read. It's only about 170 pages, but the writing was amazing. You really feel connected to all the characters, and it is so short. This is also a murder mystery, so there's really a lot going on, and all of those things are perfect for fall. I'm really excited to continue with the series. I think there's 5 or 6 books out now. Next up, I read The Beautiful by Renee Audier, which was also a library book, so I don't have it with me. This follows a girl named Celine who goes from Paris to New Orleans to escape some sort of past that we're not told about, and ends up falling into a, society with all kinds of things that I can't tell you about because they will spoil the books. I loved it. The plot was a little bit slow moving, but you, again, fall in love with the characters, and that is really what's important to me in books. I am super into character and atmosphere right now, rather than the actual plot. Obviously it's important, but you know what I mean. I'm really looking forward to reading The Damned. I actually bought it, and it's up on my fall TBR shelf, so I'm going to get to that this month. But if you're looking for something spooky, again, The Beautiful by Renee Audier is what you need to read. Okay, next up is a Dark Academia book. This is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I'm very sorry if that's incorrect. I've been really obsessed with Dark Academia things from seeing them on YouTube and TikTok. It's like just a stupid aesthetic, like it's not a real thing to be obsessed with, but here I am. I'm even wearing a Dark Academia inspired outfit today because this is who I am now. This is really hard to explain without spoiling it, but it follows 3 students at a boarding school in England where something weird is going on with their futures, and that's all I can really say. It's super creepy, the writing is very accessible, and there's apparently a movie because this is the movie cover. So I'm planning to watch that on a night when I'm prepared for like a kind of weird, creepy, emotional movie. I had read this before, so I knew the twist, but if you don't know the twist, it will be very interesting, and I would recommend that you check this out this fall. I read The Au Pair by Emma Roos. I was in the mood for another thriller, and I went on the Libby app on my Kobo, which is my e-reader, and just looked for some sort of available thriller from the library, and this is what came up. Apparently the only thriller books I read this month are about nannies / au pairs, which is interesting, but I was actually an au pair in Italy many years ago. I'm not that old. 5 years ago, I think. So I always like reading stories about that because, it's relatable except for the murder. This one is also impossible to explain without giving any spoilers because there's very complicated family dynamics and relationships going on, but it took place on some sort of beach with cliffs in England, and again, the atmosphere is there. I was very confused by the ending, and I feel like I would genuinely need to draw like a family tree to understand what was happening, but it was good, it was spooky, and I liked it. Next up, I started a new series that I am continuing this month, and that is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. This follows a girl named Audrey Rose and a boy named Thomas who are solving crimes, basically. And in this one, they are trying to find Jack the Ripper. It's a pretty slow plot, but the setting of London is very well done. It's super creepy. There's also illustrations and photographs in here and like letters and everything like that, so it makes it really feel like you're kind of involved in the case. It's also very like feminist, and the relationship is very equal, so I really enjoyed that. It wasn't like my favorite book that I've ever read, but I did enjoy it, and I'm excited to keep reading the rest of the books. Next up, I got into some more Shadowhunter books. So I read The Red Scrolls of Magic and The Lost Book of White by Cassandra Clare. This is The Lost Book of the White. I don't actually own Red Scrolls of Magic, which is one of the only Cassandra Clare books I don't own. This is actually really cool because it comes with a reversible dust jacket. So I settled on this cover for now just because I like it better. But there's also a like more traditional Shadowhunter cover on the other side so that you can make them match because they did a series cover change, which I think is really cool. So these books follow Alec and Magnus, and I believe the first one was set after City of Heavenly Fire, and I think this one like immediately follows that, maybe a year later. I really loved the first book. It was super cool to see more of Alec and Magnus as kind of the main focus of the series. This one I found dragged a little bit. The plot was kind of boring to me, and by about halfway through I was a little bit over it. With that said, will I read the next book? Absolutely. So if you are a diehard Shadowhunter fan and you want more content, I would read those. Otherwise, probably don't. Okay, the last book I read in September was another one of the best books that I read in September, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This has been all over the internet, but it follows a trans boy named Yadriel who is trying to prove to his family that he is a real brujo. His family can control, summon, they can see ghosts, basically. And they don't believe that he's going to have the ability to do so because of his, because he's transgender. So it's just the cutest story. It's perfect for Halloween. Look at this color. It's beautiful. The characters are amazing. I cried. I loved it. You need to read this book. It was so, so good. The representation is amazing. And I'm so glad that I finished the month off on this book. So with that last book, that is the 30 books that I read in September. I'm definitely not going to read 31 in October because I'm only at about 3 right now, and it's October 6th, I think. So it won't be as good of a month, but I'm so happy with all the reading that I got done. I definitely found some new favorites, as you heard, and I managed to fit in a lot of the fall reading that I've been hoping to do. So lots more time for that in October, and I will see you in my next wrap-up. Bye!